Good morning, everybody. So for those who don't know me, also because I just arrived this morning, my name is Florian Martin-Bariteau. I am an associate professor of law at the University of Ottawa and one of the co-investigators on the ACT partnership. And I was also the lead for sub-project 16 that aim at drafting a roadmap for the digital transformation of the justice system, learning from all of the work that has been done within the ACT partnership, but also before, as you know, this is like a long-standing research endeavor at the University, I was about to say at the University of Ottawa, no, Université de Montréal. So the report that I'm going to present this morning, and then some of my colleagues will be kind enough to offer some of their comments on the first draft, and then I will tell you a bit more in details. But then we will share this draft with all of the members and partners of the ACT partnership to do a kind of community peer review and see what you want to add, maybe some of the blind spot, the gap and stuff. I will come back to this. So the project started like 7 years ago, 8 years ago?
2018.
Yes.
So do the math, 7.
Yeah, 7 years ago. I know the world was very, very different 7 years ago, and when we kind of came up with the idea of this report and even the sub-project in the partnership, the world was very different. It was maybe before COVID-19 pandemic. And at the time, digitalization of the justice system was very complex, was a challenge. I will remember, I think, my whole life. So I did my PhD at Université de Montréal. So I've been part of the CRDP and Cyberjustice lab community for many years. And I remember my whole life a justice of the federal court who came here to do an actual hearing, and we're like, oh yeah, it's so cool, we're gonna see the room being used, such an opportunity. They just came and they put all of the books on the amazing screens behind, and the judge didn't want even to touch any of the button. I was like, yeah, we're very long way toward cyber justice and those kind of digitalization. So it has been a long way, but then the pandemic happened, and kind of overnight they had to move the justice system online. And we kind of seen what many of the papers with people within the ACT partnership have said for many years, well, you need to be careful, you need to think about this. There is equity concern, there is procedural concerns. And maybe some of us could have told them, well, we told you so. But so we learned a lot also, and so now it's more common, and it's actually a clear objective of most of the government and judiciary institutions around the world to digitalize the justice system. Some people tried, it was more or less successful. We had a few issues along the way. We ran into a few challenges like the technological debt of the justice system, the data debt also of the justice system. So this is what we tried to look at in a world where the last UNESCO report that was published in 2025, but from data from 2024, showcased that as of today, 44% of the judicial operators, so judges, court officials, and some of the lawyers being involved, are using AI tool to produce content, to think about a case. Many of them said that, well, actually, I think it's only 16% who are actually provided with such tools by the organization. So they just use tools from commercial vendors. And many say, oh, yeah, we don't have the money, so we just use the free version to brainstorm about our case. This is a bit worrisome, and 9% say that they don't have enough training about this, and they don't have enough guidelines. Things that, we knew, or we kind of guess, and we have this snapshot of what is happening a few years after the pandemic, where we think that we would have learned. I know there's been so many scandals in the headlines about AI. We thought that I've learned. And so this is that kind of snapshot that the report is trying to do. Initially, it was supposed to be more like a summary of the research led under the ACT partnership. But then during the pandemic and one of the big ACT researcher meeting, we had a conversation with some of the sub-project group leaders, and we agreed that the report will look at what has been done through the research partnership, but also what has been done like outside around the world to learn from like best practices, but also like the pitfall. So in the report, I kind of seek to like chronicle, the technological advancements, but also to underscore some of the issues and needs for like careful design, for like funding, and the issue about like governance. So a story about like pitfalls, scandals, but a few successes. And so we looked at a lot of the research that was produced by the ACT researchers, etc., like research outside, as I mentioned. Also a lot of conversation through the partnership and outside. I had like through the events, but also I had the opportunity to talk with a lot of people, at CEPEJ, at the Council of Europe, like in France with Cour de Cassation, Ministère de la Justice français. Of course, in Canada with the courts and the department. I should have started by then. But also in Brazil. Brazil has been leading some of the digital transformation with a lot of successes. And as some people know, I'm very often in Brazil. And so this summer, I was at the Supreme Judicial Court, STJ, who has been leading, actually even before STF, so even before Victor with Atos, some AI tools. And so I met with the developers, with the people leading this to discuss, what they learn and how they're evolving, issues with judges, with clerks, with the justice system users. So that was very interesting. So a lot of this beyond just like the review of literature inform the report. But like the scope also, so the ACT partnership is very broad. There is like a lot of topic for the report also, because it was a lot of work and my goal was to do 50 pages and I think it's 49 pages. Last week it was 100 pages, so a lot of work went in like trying to summarize and compact this. So it's the proposed roadmap is about the justice system. Only like within the course, some of the tools, I will come back to this, but not like the pre-conflict resolution or like conflict prevention, or some more like other amazing research that has been done through the partnership. It might be a critique and something we want to revisit, but I was trying to look at stuff, and also looking at decision tools. I looked at, again, the justice system, like the courts. I didn't look at all of the decision tools being currently, tested or deployed within governments. Like in Canada, has been doing a lot of work about this, but because it was basically another 50 pages that I would love to write about, like, AI decision making, assisted with big quotes within the federal government or like government around the world. So that was put on the site. Today, basically, I'm going to present what I call a zero draft. Will be sent to you after. And so the idea will be to have the feedback of the researchers, but also of the partners, because so many things happen. Literally, like, I think it's last week, for example, that the Federal Court of Canada changed the guidelines about AI. So it's changing like every week. It's very, very, very hard. Literally yesterday in the train, I was reviewing a few footnotes and realized that Hawaii changed again the policy with ODR and like some of the AI tools. So basically I will ask for the help of like the community to do a kind of like community peer review of the report. And the aim will be then to publish it for like, for the community and the public in English, but also in French. Early, I would say like early 2026. So about the content, so this is how a lot of work has been done and debate about this, how the report is being divided. So with a big introduction that explained the complex of digitalization and what this report is, and then the first section, and I debated a lot, but an issue that came up a lot over the years, but also within the scholarship, is the issue about data, the data debt within the justice system that is needed first to inform, have evidence-based policy making about from the judiciary, but also from the government. Without clear data and open data, we cannot learn about things. It helps to do a lot of, analytics, but doing analytics about the justice system is yet another challenge. And depending of the history, and some of the things we discussed is like, the law in France that prohibits analytics and geometrics about like judges that you kind of understand when you understand how the French system work and its history, but like in the common law jurisdiction, the view can be quite different, and you might even think that there will be some constitutional like issues to prohibit such kind of like analytics, etc. So trying to unpack a lot of this. We've also just the access to decision that is still a challenge around the world. We always say like open access to justice, access to law. We kind of okay nowadays around the world over just the access to statutes, but in many jurisdictions, even in France, and I will go to where about this, case law is a source of law. And if you don't have access to all of the decision, how can you say that the public has access to the law? So I think it's part of this. So this is kind of the thing we discuss, and I know that a lot of people, especially at Université de Montréal over the years, have been working on this. And so from this kind of like primary section, we move on more like some of the practices and tools. And so section 2 is about the digital tools that has been developed. Some of them before AI. We didn't wait for AI to test things. So some developed to enhance the practice of law. So for lawyers, clerks, etc., crown prosecutors. Then kind of unpacking a lot of the tools developed to support self-represented litigants, and there has been a lot of work. But discussing some of the issues also that those tools, both for lawyers, for professionals, and self-represented litigants, raised over the years, especially with the rise of AI. There is a lot of issues about transparency, the famous black box, about accuracy and hallucination, especially as now we've seen more and more submission with a lot of hallucination being presented to courts. Courts have been quite nice when it came from self-represented litigants, not so welcoming when it came from lawyers, rightfully I would say, but also sometimes we saw some decision being rendered based on hallucinated cases. So this is an issue, and also something that we discuss a lot and across the report is the digital gap and the lack of technical literacy. We're not going to solve, all of the issues and even access to justice just by like a few tools or deploying a few AIs, because not everybody has the technical literacy, but not everybody has access to the device for those kind of tools, doesn't have the broadband, and you don't need to look like very far away around the world. Just look at Canada. If you're outside of the big cities in Canada, as we've seen during the pandemic or even like during winter or even summer, you don't necessarily have the broadband needed to use those kind of tools. So this is an issue of equitable access to the justice system for like indigenous communities, rural communities, etc. So this is something we try to unpack. Then section 3 moved to online dispute resolution, and all the work that has been done, especially in Cyberjustice Lab, and Université de Montréal has been leading, also with McGill University, Fabien being just in front of me. I've been leading this work for many years, and it's something that started like kind of in the private sector, and it kind of looked like fake justice. It was not serious thing. And it moved especially over the past decades, being like actually adopted by the courts. Some of them, even like for small claim, being like, so you first go through this system before coming to the courts. Also like some authorities, like the ACT researchers worked with, Office de la Protection du Consommateur, with Paul, like a lot of tools have been developed. So we also go through some of those tools to see, what worked, what didn't work in some jurisdiction. And again, unpacking some of the procedural and equity concern with some of those tools, and again, the digital gap and the technical gap. And one more time, this is like a very important thing to keep in mind. Not everybody has access, not everybody understands this kind of system. And also for some people, if it doesn't follow like the usual kind of decorum of the court, they don't feel like it's real. Although it's working, but it's not like perfect, and so more work needs to do. And so, as I mentioned, like ODR kind of move within the justice system, and this is what we've seen over the years, like, and this is what we looked at in section 4, like this movement of digitalization of the courts from the very like kind of low-tech system that has, again, we didn't wait for AI. It's now enhanced by AI, but we didn't wait for it. So we look at all of the work around like the digitalization of case management. So it started with e-filing, but also like, how to manage the case within the court. So it started very like low-tech with a web portal, and now like more and more courts also have integrated system or even like AI-enhanced system to like receive the case, but then orient it, for example, like in Cour de Cassation, like in Brazil, within the different chambers of the court, and then judges can have like tools to map this with past case laws or like other rules, etc. So like very cool things that are like being developed often within the court, sometimes with private vendors, which raise a few issues. I will come back to this. Then moving to the virtual court hearings. That has been like one of the maybe biggest transformation since the COVID pandemic. It existed before, but it was more like to have like a few witnesses, like, in either to preserve for the safety or for the confidentiality of the identity of the witness, or like maybe some time of a litigant. During COVID, it moved of like, everybody, but there's been issues, procedural issues, like with lawyers in criminal cases. Like if you're a lawyer, should you be in the room with the judge and the prosecutors, or should you be with your clients to advise them? And you cannot be in two places at the same time. So, or you do this, and again, it is great in theory. In practice, with digital gap, it's an issue, and with the bad connectivity, we know that if the image starts to be a bit like pixelated or like, it cuts, it might create some tensions with the judge or, with the jurors who might not fully like, understand or not trust anymore. So that's a big issue, but something also I look at and that I think is like cool and could help is, and the research shown that like if you move everybody kind of at the same level, it might help with some of those procedural like issues. So not to have like have everybody online. And so some people had looked at virtual and extended reality courtroom, again, including at the Cyberjustice lab, like trying to replicate this to see how we could work and maybe mitigate some of those issues. Again, you need to have access to the equipment and to be able to connect. But there might be some ideas, and more we see some community help centers, and maybe a digital justice strategy should involve like not having courts all over the countries, but maybe having some community centers that are like fully equipped for litigants to be able to come with like very good broadband and access to like headset and other things, or like, very good computers, or like very expensive for some people, and devices to use this. That could be an idea that kind of emerged from the research. And of course, the report looked at the emergence of this AI-enhanced judiciary with the tools for the court system. helping with case, with annotation, with decision making, which raise a lot of procedural and equity concerns. Again, also because of the lack of transparency, a lot of tools being developed, especially in North America, I would say in the US, by vendors. You don't know exactly what's happening. There is issues of accuracy, etc. Again, there is a digital and infrastructure gap for those kind of tool. And also, what we've seen in the past years is lack of guidelines and a very inconsistent judicial approach on the use of AI around the world, which doesn't really help with just adoption, or maybe also coming up with common understanding and principle, with some court deciding no, everything is prohibited, or maybe just for administrative matters. But what is administrative matters? This is the new position of the Federal Court of Canada. Case orientation, is it that administrative? Where would you draw the line? It's complex. Others have been do whatever you want. You're the judge. You should be aware of, how the system works and the limits of it. But the judges are we don't know because nobody trained us about this. So, so it's kind of all of the research and report around the world that we're trying to summarize and unpack. And based on this, we try to kind of design of a roadmap or principle for a safe and equitable digital transformation of the justice system. As I mentioned, there is this UNESCO survey of court operators. Also, the UNESCO published some draft principles that are under consultation at the moment. Last July, the UN Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges raised the alarm and cautioned, member states about the rise of AI within the court that is often unchecked, unguided, and also sometimes just managed with kind of techno-solutionism approaches or by governments, which raise a few issues for the independence and the autonomy of the judiciary around the world. And so from the research and so those best practices, concerns, pitfalls, successes raised by the deployment of digital and AI systems, not just AI, I kind of saw 8 key principles emerging to support a successful, safe, and equitable digital transformation of the justice system. The first one is that, and I think all of them, people in this room will be duh, obviously, but trust me, when you do the review of the literature, this is not so obvious for many people around the world. It should be evidence-based, so based on data, not just because, it's cool. Is deploying an AI, the best option, led by the judiciary itself. It should include training and campaign to raise awareness about the opportunities, but also the risk and limitations. It should embed the human rights affirming approach. It should be supported by piloting, assessment, and multi-stakeholder engagement, as well as user-based feedback loop to always make the system evolve with the need of the system, provide for human and judicial oversight, support human and human-centric system, deploy secure and open system, meaning no transparent system, no black box, so you need full algorithmic transparency. And last but not least, you may want to adopt a digital default, but you should not adopt a digital-only approach to make sure that you actually enhance access to justice without creating new barriers. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Florian. It was really interesting to listen to. I'm just going to comment briefly on one of the principles that you listed in the end there about human judicial oversight. And I think it's a really difficult challenge to truly enable oversight. And I can speak to it. There are lots of reasons for that, some of them administrative, some of them technological, but I'll speak to the psychological ones, which is we have, as we all know, an automation bias. there's a sense of, the status quo is something that that is very easy to accept, and it's very difficult to remember something that isn't currently here. It's tremendously hard. So asking people to reflect backwards on what might have been or the way processes used to be is not going to work. I also think I saw in the principles to judges over and over again, and throughout the report, that the recommendation always is, well, check the work. Go back and check the outcome. And people are going to have a hard time doing this, and they're going to have a really hard time the better those systems get. The better they get, the more likely it is that the errors that do exist will slip through, because monitoring that kind of thing is really tremendously difficult. And I've been thinking about this problem for a while. We use terms like human in the loop, or human on the loop, or machine in the loop, or whatever, however we want to talk about it. I think that we need, as always, to look outside of our own disciplines to think about who has tackled a similar problem. And one of the things I've been thinking about, I have lots of thoughts and things that I don't follow through on often enough, but I'm thinking a lot about, what do we know about people managing teams that are doing things they don't understand? And I think there is a lot of knowledge about that. And I think it exists in business, and I think it exists in the management of expert teams. And I think there's a tremendous literature there that we can draw on, intersecting with what we know about how people are interacting with machines and all the biases we know that exist. But there's a very interesting thing sociologically that has to go on there. If I'm a judge and I'm using these tools, as I should be, to be part of my team, I'm not delegating authority to them, I'm not handing over decision-making to them, but realistically what we want is for them, those tools to be part of the team that I'm working with. We really need to be training people on how to do that well, and we really need to understand, how do you supervise someone that is doing work you don't understand and couldn't do yourself. And I do think we know things about this, and I don't think we've leveraged that knowledge enough. Jane said to me today, is that going to be possible? I said, I don't know if it's going to be possible, but what I do know is we need to recognize that it's going to be hard, and that we, as always, need to leverage existing research that might help us solve the problem. So, and I think there's a lot more to say and a lot of exciting things, but I'll stop there.
So thank you so much, Florian. I was heartened, as you won't be surprised, to see your emphasis on a human rights-centered approach, which I think really needs to animate decision-making here. And I also struggle, as probably been clear over the course of the last few days and the last 8 years, with how, as justice system actors ourselves, as people with responsibility to the public interest and to justice more broadly, how we should be thinking about the sort of systemic, or if you will, epistemic issues related to AI. And those have been raised, they were raised yesterday, like environmental consequences. Like if everybody is operating in their own little bubble about how do I mobilize this technology for the purposes of my sector, who's got their eye on the consequences in terms of energy, in terms of water, in terms of land use? I'm struck constantly by these headlines about, Google's recently taken a 20-year lease to get 3 Mile Island rolling again. Like it's as if there's parts of this that feel like we've like forgotten some very significant lessons from the past. So I don't know, I don't have the answer to it, but I feel like that big picture, as people with a responsibility to the public, is something somehow we have to be thinking about. The other thing I think about all the time, and I talk endlessly to my students about, which they're so happy they didn't have to see me today, how do we think about the unacknowledged labor that is the fodder for the product of AI, and the idea that we're, in effect, the commons is being recolonized in a different form. We've all become subjects of a sort of grand social experiment that's, in my view, non-consensual. And I feel like I can't whenever I start to think about the particular issues, I get so distracted by the bigger issues, and I don't know how we incorporated it except to say I feel like it's something that we have to think about. And the other thing I was really sort of moved by yesterday were the presentations by Arnaud, by Karim, by Jean-Pierre about the importance of centering, so it's not just paying attention to human rights, but centering the lived experience of marginalized communities who are most likely to be disproportionately negatively affected by whatever the particular, if there are negative outcomes, that it almost always falls along established lines of social marginalization. So the idea that we need processes that actually engage communities, and I just feel like and how do we, and how we often look to government and Arnaud's discussion about what's going on in the EU, that's really sort of heartening. I worry in that context, having observed only a little bit of what's gone on in the Canadian context, and we haven't moved very far on this, but how government is very concerned about multi-stakeholder engagement, which I understand, but the way that multi-stakeholderism, again, devolves into a process, again, that's colonized by big tech. So how do we, and I'm sure, I don't know if you had more time to talk, we could have heard more about that, like thinking in depth about how you support communities who don't have the kind of resources that big tech has, so that you feel like you have something approaching a level playing field in these kind of discussions. I'm also super, I got addicted to the Massey lectures, which are available as podcasts, and I listened to Ursula Franklin's 1989 Real World of Technology, which I highly commend to everyone, because the more things change, the more they stay the same, I would say. And she posits this idea that we've often thought of, we look to government to help us do these things, and we have to understand as a community our obligation to do it ourselves, right? And how do we mobilize that? And if we do mobilize opportunities to engage, like, let's have where are the forums other than these kind of things where people get to talk about, I don't like the fact that I'm a guinea pig in a grand social experiment, and I feel like I'd like to have my say. And again, the work of Jean-Pierre and Karim, I think, is really important for understanding how, for example, academics can take the privileges that we have and the resources that we have access to support communities, and to recognize the fact that there are, despite all the odds, marginalized communities, civil society organizations working on shoestrings or nothing that are doing fantastic, amazing work on these topics. And how can we think about academics? I think they're shining examples of how academics can take the resources that they have, and researchers can take the resources they have and support that and shine a light on it. And I think there needs to be more of that. And I think we can also think of other ways of how governments can support that, whether financially or otherwise. So I'll stop there. The other thing I want to say about Ursula Franklin is she offers, this is my daughter texting me, is one of the problems of having my notes on my phone. When she talks about conversations, she also offers sort of 7 observations about what are the kinds of questions we should be asking if we want to facilitate these kind of conversations, including asking whether any particular thing contributes to justice, who benefits, who loses, maybe very obvious things, but that help us to focus the conversations. So this is just a plea for public democratic engagement.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Very good last word. Fabien?
Thank you. Thank you, Karim. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored and I'm humbled to be here in this panel because it's a kind of a closing of a long adventure, a long journey, and it's the second 7-year journey
Yes.
that we do together.
And we still look just as good. To each other.
It's been a fantastic adventure, and the most amazing thing is that 7 years ago, no one had a clue where we would be now.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, ChatGPT was dropped in the middle of all this, in the middle of the project, and what we had imagined would be the research became very different in the middle of the project. So it was an exciting journey for that reason. So please indulge me in wanting to thank Karim, our fearless leader in this adventure, thanking my co-group leaders, Jackie and Jane, and of course also Nicolas. I think this was an exhilarating hike in the mountains. But without Nicolas, it might have been a trudge in the swamp, because he really carried a lot of the work that needed to be done for this project to flourish in the way that it did flourish, the way I see it. I also thank Florian here, who was brave enough to take on the task of preparing the document that is really the capstone.
Crazy enough, different word. But
It's the capstone document at the end of the project. And when I say brave, I do say it deliberately, and I say it from the perspective of the British humor of a bygone era, where you don't want someone to tell you that what you're doing is brave. So I will make a confession at this point. We had, many months ago, we had a meeting about this document where we discussed the possible approaches to that document. It was a long meeting. It was disconnected. It was all over the place, I would say. And I came out of the meeting thinking that Florian could not pull it off or would not pull it off. I came out of the meeting thinking that no one could pull it off. And it turns out, and I learned about this very recently, that Florian is a master of suspense. Because my doubts remained until very recently indeed. So at the beginning of the week, we received a draft report, and I was pleased as puck, I have to say, browsing through the report, being able to see that he actually did pull it off. So congratulations and thank you. Of course, it's a first iteration of something that is quite complex. There are many people in the projects. Not everyone will recognize themselves in the report. And so the task, it's only the beginning of this task in a way. But I think it's a truly excellent starting point. So congratulations and thank you. This is my first comment on the report. I was asked to focus a little bit on the ODR part because I was involved in some of the first projects, ODR projects. several decades ago. It was a very exciting time, and then it became a pretty depressing time after a while, because nobody paid attention to it, no one was interested, the courts were not interested. So it took as you mentioned, the pandemic for people to start paying attention to these issues. And sometimes we say that necessity is the mother of invention. In this case, I would say that necessity was the mother of adoption rather than invention. I'll always remember the day that a few weeks into the pandemic, I received a message, a very official-looking message from the Chief Justice of Quebec. I received it as a member of the Quebec Bar, stating that there would be online hearings now in all the Quebec courts. It also stated that it would take place using Microsoft Teams. So the first statement is about a very old and very comfortable legal practice that was changing overnight, essentially. There was a huge change there that was provoked by the pandemic. And the second statement about having recourse to Microsoft was a preview, I now know, of a film with which we're all familiar. I mean, we were thinking at the time that people would develop these softwares for actual needs of actual people in actual places. And it turned out to be slightly different. And that film is not necessarily a very good film, as we all know. You've mentioned in your presentation some of the qualifications I would put on the report. I was a little bit disappointed that the focus was very much on Canada and Canadian courts, but of course I realized that this is a way of making the report manageable. It would have been totally unmanageable. So that's something I won't go into. I know that the report takes care to open up things to further horizons, and that's well done. So my only comment on the ODR bit is that. When the whole ODR adventure began, it was very much tied up with the idea at the time of an internet which was in another place without law and without courts, a space where territorial boundaries didn't exist. It was another sort of space. Then ODR got tied up in debates, very important debates, about the distinction between private justice and public justice, where ODR takes place. It got tied up in debates about soft resolution of disputes and hard resolution of disputes. And now with the experience of the pandemic, we all know that we can have online hearings, that it's possible, that there are limitations, that it's not perfect, that one needs to think about all kinds of concerns with the practice, but that it is indeed possible. We all know that. So my comment would be to say that ODR now is probably going to follow the path of e-commerce. I remember the early 2000s when we all talked about e-commerce. We were very excited about e-commerce.
I never was, actually.
Sorry?
I never was.
You never. A lot of people were excited about e-commerce. And now we don't talk about e-commerce. E-commerce is just commerce, right? And my sense is that ODR is going down exactly the same path. Online dispute resolution is just dispute resolution.
Yeah.
It's just part of the same subject. So I think that the sort of historical bracket where it was a separate subject would probably close very soon. And so that's what I have for now.
Thank you, Fabien. Well, I have a very short comment because time is running, and I think that we have to cede the floor to the students, but I'll give you the word also. But two little comment very far. You know, it's very strange because we've been working not 7 or 8 years, but 15 years.
Yes.
Because we've started with the tour, the Cyberjustice project, and then we've moved to AI. But finally, before moving to AI, maybe we should try to install a real digital court. You know, that's one of my first comments because the court are still running on papers, and there's those virtual hearings for sure. But still, I mean, when you take a look at what is being done before the courts, it's still very much paper-based and so on and so forth. And all the different projects that we identify, remember, in toward Cyberjustice project, were failures in Canada, in the US, and elsewhere. The same mistake are again being committed by the same actors. Yeah. So I think that we should send to those guys our report again and again and force them to read it because obviously it didn't sink in. A very short comment before ceding the floor to Florian for a little conclusion. You were saying that the court were not so nice with lawyers who were using AI, false references, but the courts in Quebec, at least the Superior Court, is not very nice also with ordinary litigants, because I think it was yesterday or a few weeks, 1 week ago or whatever, an ordinary litigant was fined $5,000 for for producing, I should say, false references to the court.
Yeah.
$5,000. And
Self-represented.
Self-represented, he was not a lawyer. So that's quite a shock, I must say. Anyway.
Yeah.
So before, I would like to thank my team leader because, as I said, it has been a great privilege and a pleasure to work with them for more than 15 years because before starting the Towards Cyberjustice project, we had to prepare it. Huh?
Yeah.
So it was at least a year. So it was a formidable scientific adventure. So thank you very much, Jane. Thank you very much, Jackie and Fabien. And let's hope that our report will have some influence on the justice system, or at least be an influence, or maybe more than that, for students and the next generation.